Those Days with the Monsters, Part 59. Kirill took a moment, feeling his claws click on the floor. His balance seemed slightly off. Apparently he'd gotten used to walking in the restraints.
"Where are we going?"
he asked quietly, stepping cautiously around a green pool. He didn't want more Tizik's blood on his feet. It made him remember things he'd rather forget.
"To Central Control. Cook sent most of the technicians home, but I think I understand it well enough to send a basic message."
Cinna's appendages were also bouncing light. He too was shaking. Kirill glanced back at Gux's body on the floor, and something in his chest hurt a little bit.
"Did he mean a lot to you?"
Cinna's steps faltered for a moment, and his throat sac deflated with a hiss. It took a moment before it filled up again, and he spoke.
"Well, something like that. I had no parents. He taught me for a while."
He began to move again.
"This isn't the time. Every second counts. We can talk later."
Kirill hurried to try and keep up. Cinna was moving very fast, but somehow it was easier to keep pace than Kirill had expected. That didn't mean that it was easy, of course. Cinna was so much larger than him, and he moved quickly in the wide hallway. Kirill noticed that Cinna's feet could push off the walls as easily as the floors, and he often would use the corner between wall and floor for a bit more speed. Kirill found himself wondering if all the Tiziks could do that, or if it was just Cinna. Soon they arrived at the wide room with the small elevation at one end. The one Kirill had arrived in after he was captured. It was entirely empty now. Kirill's frills went slightly yellow. The room felt eerie, abandoned, almost dreamlike. A few projected holograms remained blinking or glitching in ghostly shades along the walls. He'd been in here so recently, but it was so different now. Even the blue light from the star overhead felt eerie, ghastly, wrong.
Of course he sent everyone home. It would be much easier if at least the technicians had stayed.
Cinna's voice had a strange whistle to it.
"I think we can get a message out."
Anxiety. Kirill gulped, his frills turning bright yellow. If Cinna was nervous, what should he be? What would happen if he couldn't get the message out? To him and to the Tiziks. He couldn't seem to get that shrieking hiss out of his head, and the horrible aching feeling stuck in his chest somewhere. It was strange, really. The monolithic monsters that horrified merchant ships, the villains of all the stories. What happened to that? When had he started to worry about them? Then again, he worried about the Khumans too, and they were definitely monstrous. They were capable of smashing the Tiziks military with a single ship, and a weapon he still didn't understand. He really should be more afraid of them too. Maybe he'd stopped feeling fear. That would explain it. Cinna began to inspect the machines, making a series of low clicks under his breath. Kirill didn't understand exactly what was happening, but it didn't sound good.
"Can you reach them?"
he finally asked, red and yellow staining his frills.
"I don't know."
Cinna had 3 different appendages on various machines, and his head moved quickly between them. Kirill couldn't tell what Cinna was looking for, not that he would have recognized it if he knew.
"This wasn't my field, and half of them were left running processes I don't understand. 2 have already broken, at least. I think they're broken. And the ones that are left are half frozen by processes I don't know how to stop."
Kirill's heart sank.
"Then what do we do?"
For a moment, Cinna stood still. Kirill was afraid to disturb him. Then the throat sac inflated with a hiss, and Cinna clicked quietly.
I don't think I have any right to that, but thank you."
Cinna went back to checking the machines, with an increased, even feverish pace.
"I don't know. Do you think? Maybe. No, that's silly." "Maybe it is. The Khumans do a lot of things by pretending they're not silly. What is it?"
Cinna's appendages paused.
"Well, do they know how to read our normal military channels?"
Kirill's frills pulsed a nervous yellow.
Well,
He sighed, and his frills drooped a bit.
"Well, yes, they know how. I don't know if they are." "Well, we'll take that chance then."
Tsuna clicked briefly, before turning to one machine that was blinking with a slow, steady orange light.
If they can read it, maybe I don't have to make all these famine-sotted machines work. Any of them might be enough.
Kirill could hear Tsuna's throat sac inflating and deflating as he worked. He knew Tizzix didn't breathe. What was the sac for? Speaking? If so, was this like the time Sleepy had said half words without explaining what hillbilly meant? It didn't feel quite the same somehow. Still, the quiet was very awkward, and he didn't like it much. Maybe Tsuna didn't either.
What are you doing?
Kirill finally asked. He didn't want to interrupt Tsuna when he was doing something important, but at the same time he was supposed to be helping. What kind of help could he be if he didn't understand what was happening? Besides, Tsuna sounded unhappy, and that was frightening. Kirill hadn't quite forgotten that his survival depended on the goodwill of the Tizzix. Almost, but not quite.
I was hoping to be able to communicate with them, but communications are breaking. It might be because Gux sent everyone to their families.
Tsuna's throat sac deflated slightly, with a sharp hissing sound.
I was hoping to use your voice, but the most we can send is a few words. Written.
Kirill's frills turned faintly teal in a sea of nervous yellow.
Is that bad? Maybe. It depends on the Simon.
Tsuna pulled a small lever and made a small whispery rattle. His appendages bounced light in a shivering dance. It was subtle, and in an Elam Kirill would have noticed, but with the glossy sheen of the Tizzix he could tell. Tsuna was shaking.
Everything depends on how they respond. I suppose that's no different from the rest of this war.
Kirill nodded slowly, his frills stained yellow and red.
Will they know it's me that's asking? I don't know. I think I can make it work, but I don't know.
Tsuna's voice was achingly heavy.
It's worth a try.
Kirill didn't know what kind of emotion was in that voice, and neither did his translator. It sounded almost hopeless was the wrong word. Kirill wasn't good at reading Tizzix's emotions, and he felt as if Tsuna was going through the motions of hope without actually hoping. Kirill didn't like that. It was eerie.
How do you write your name?
Tsuna finally asked softly. Kirill explained his name, a mere 4 characters in Galactic Standard, before his frills flushed a bright yellow again.
I don't know if they know how it's spelled. I have no idea if they know how it's spelled. They probably don't, in fact. This isn't going to work, is it? What happens if this doesn't work?
Tsuna fiddled with the machine for a few moments, then made a rattling click that Kirill was beginning to recognize as a sigh.
Well, we'll see. This might work, or it might not.
He sounded so calm, while his appendages shook almost imperceptibly.
It depends on the Simon, and on you, on how they feel about you.
Kirill's heart sank. He wasn't sure how the Khumans felt about him. They acted oddly attached, but he had no way of knowing how long that would last, or if it was enough to do what Tsuna was hoping it would do. But if the alternative was frightening enough to make a Tizzix shake, Kirill was fairly sure it was enough to stop a scared Elam's heart immediately.
I know you've done a lot recently, Hearts, but please don't stop yet.
Time dragged on. Kirill wasn't sure how long it had been when Tsuna made the click sigh sound and lowered most of his body onto the ground. Was that what sitting looked like for the Tizzix? Kirill had only ever seen them standing. The Elam didn't really sit much, but he awkwardly squatted down as well.
Do you know when they'll respond? Maybe now, maybe in a day, maybe never.
Tsuna clicked weakly.
I think I'm running out of strength to be afraid with.
Kirill briefly wondered if he was in the same position, but he decided probably not. He didn't think he'd ever really run out of fear.
I wonder if that's why I stopped being afraid of the Khumans.
But that didn't sound right either. The stars overhead shifted slowly. Kirill had hunkered down by one of the whirring machines. Tsuna passed him a handful of the purple stalks, and he chewed quietly, staring off into the distance. Tsuna was also eating stalks. Kirill hadn't known the Tizzix ate plants too.
Omnivores.
He knew it wasn't a common trait, but he kept running into them,
but some of them are addicted to meat. Weird.
But then again, sometimes eland would become dependent on red misel seed pods, so maybe it wasn't that strange. Kirill found himself wondering if every species found something to become impaired with, depending on their biology.
Look at me, acting like a xenoanthropologist. No degree or anything.
Briefly, he wondered if it would have made any difference if the clutch had seen him like this, but he shook it off. It didn't really matter what they would have thought anyway. The machine beeped and a blip of text appeared. Kirill couldn't read Tizik's writing, but Cinna had leapt to his feet and was reading furiously.
Immediate surrender of all farm planets. Fine. Cut off the farm planets from outside information to prevent harm to the sapients.
Cinna tapped a few buttons.
Already done. Why even include disarmament? Don't they know there's no weapons left to use?
Kirill's frills pulsed teal and fuchsia.
What is it? Terms of protection.
Cinna was reading eagerly, nodding occasionally, before he froze in an instant. He stood motionless for so long that Kirill began to fear that he'd died.
Ha!
An explosive, bitter noise made Kirill jump. Despair, the translator called it. Kirill's heart sank.
What's wrong? Oh, we'll still take it. There's no other option. But, hungry have mercy. You'll have many to judge today.
Kirill didn't understand all of it, but Cinna didn't sound happy. But he didn't get the chance to ask, because Cinna immediately turned on some sort of recording device, and Kirill couldn't interrupt.
This is Cinna, acting Grand Commander of the Tiziks. We are accepting protection of the Xyman. It is a controversial action, to be sure, but there is no other way to defend ourselves from those around us. They have sworn that if the creature beside me survives, many Tiziks will survive as well.
Cinna gestured to Kirill, whose frills suddenly pulsed yellow. He hadn't expected to be pointed out in a broadcast, but Cinna wasn't done.
But not all of us will survive. The Xyman have made a demand that we must accept. Those who knowingly participated in the farming and consumption of sapient flesh are to die. The Xyman have named the farming of sapients an atrocity of the highest order, and they refuse to protect those involved. For the sake of the remainder, those the Xyman will not protect must be purged. We can do nothing but accept this demand. For aeons we have followed the gods of feast and of famine. Now we must follow the Xyman. They are famine, the hungry goddess. They are the Maw, the shadowed. They order a sacrifice, and it must be obeyed. May the hungry acquit those who die today. This message will repeat.
Cinna flipped a switch and sank down onto the floor. Kirill was about to ask when the rattling click that replaced the Khumans' amusement noise sounded in the room. Hysteria. For some time, Cinna made a sound while Kirill fidgeted. Finally, with a hiss, Cinna's air sac deflated and he stood, turning around with heavy steps before sinking back down.
Did you know I was in love once?
He asked, almost contemplatively.
What?
Kirill didn't know where that had come from.
Child's love, really. We played together in the marshes. I thought she was beautiful with mud on her carapace.
Cinna let out a hiss from his throat sac, as if remembering something fondly.
I didn't see her again after Gux took me in. I hope she's doing well. I hope she didn't eat any.
With one front appendage, Cinna pointed toward a corridor.
Take that hallway. Turn left at the crossroads, then right. The door is unlocked. It shouldn't be too dangerous with the announcement. They know they need you.
He let out another rattling click, this one less hysterical and more hollow, followed by a slow, deflating hiss, and nudged Kirill with one appendage.
Go on. You have saved us twice over. There's no point in staying in this complex. There's nothing to do here. I think the food storage is empty anyway.
Kirill turned and started down the hallway, his frills yellow with nervousness. Tunna hadn't moved.
Are you leaving too? Eventually. I have a few things to do first. I'm acting Grand Commander. I should at least make sure things are in order.
Kirill thought that seemed reasonable, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Still, he turned and walked away, looking for the corridor. Behind him, another hiss, as if Tunna had deflated, sounded faintly. The wide, white corridor reached a crossroads, just like Tunna had said. Kirill turned left, but he could hear a quiet rattle, the same hollow noise as before.
Well, that's that then.
Tunna's voice was slow and heavy.
One time. Just one time. At a party. I didn't think about it. Oh, hungry. I did my best. Have mercy.
Kirill's frills stained red and deep blue, and he raced back around the corner, in time to watch a splash of green spraying out over the machine.